Hello, everybody, and welcome to our special anniversary edition of We Are the World Games. My name is Philipp Döring, and I am very pleased to announce our guest for today, Koren. Ko has been associated with the World Games from its foundation 40 years ago until today. Hello, Ko.
Hello, good afternoon.
It's a pleasure to have you here. We are celebrating the anniversary of the IWGA this year. The IWGA is the organization behind the World Games. It has been founded in 1980. How do you remember the foundation in 1980? Was it more like a get-together of a few friends in the sports world, or was it already professional then?
No, I don't think it was professional, but to be very correct, I was not in the actual meeting. I was involved in a federation, Tug of War, and I was vice president at that time. And the president, Mr. Fuki Fuchs, he was vice president of the World Games Council, and they met in Seoul in Korea.
And you said you were active in the Tug of War Federation then. You were also an athlete, a Tug of War athlete. Is this right?
Well, I started as that, but in 1980 I was already team manager and I was vice president of the Tug of War International Federation. But I was in Santa Clara, the first games, as team manager of a Dutch team.
And how do you remember the first games in Santa Clara in 1981?
Well, as I say, I was team manager, and so I wasn't hosted in any special official hotels. I was just in the university with the athletes, and I recall that from all the World Games that I've done, I've been at all of them, as very special because I was one of the athletes. Well, not an athlete, but I was in the athlete hotel and going to the college dining hall where they're all together, and later the central catering has become an important issue in the World Games, and in Santa Clara we had it from the very beginning. And I recall that gave most of the participants, which for them was the first multi-sport event, a very, very special feeling, which they didn't know, but some of them had been at Olympic Games before, and they felt the same feeling as in an Olympic event.
So after the first games, you joined the executive committee in 1983, I think, and were with the committee for the second edition of the Games, 1985 in London, and for the third edition in Karlsruhe in Germany in 1989. You were the Secretary General.
Yeah, and after Karlsruhe, I became Secretary General, that's correct. In Karlsruhe itself, we had an extra meeting, and then at the next meeting in Budapest, I became Secretary General.
So was this already a step towards a more professionalism on the side of the World Games?
I would think if you look back at the history of the World Games, it is a continuous evolution. I wouldn't say that we became directly professional. We have changed and evolved over time, listened to what should be better and what could improve. And in particular, the federations has always tried to find what the improvements could be for the organization. And vice versa, I mean the executive, have been trying to explain to the members that their top sport presentation is essential for the success of the World Games.
For me, I always thought a big step for the World Games was the World Games in 2001 in Akita, because after 20 years, it was the first time that the Games took place somewhere else than in the US or in Europe. Do you also recall this as a big step for the World Games?
Not so much as an enormous step. It was a change to go from the Western world, into a Asiatic country, and in particular, yes, in the preparation time, the language problem had a special, and being in Akita in Japan, we were used to have coordination meetings with the organizing committee, where you have a staff from the organizers and from our side, from the World Games. We had 2 or 3 officials in that. But I recall the meetings in Akita, that we had an inner circle of maybe 15, and we were only 3 from the World Games. And then was an outer circle with translators, with representatives. And if we had a special question, it took a long time before we got the answer, because they had to do translation, but not only that, they consulted all their specialists in the backside, and then after 10 minutes to say, okay, and then we went on.
It seems that it didn't affect the games in a way that they seem to be very successful in the East.
Oh yeah, in the end it was a very good event. That was not the problem, and they were very helpful, but it is their style of meetings. They have to get to an agreement amongst themselves before they can say yes, and that is in itself a very good thing, because then you are sure that everybody is on the same line.
The sport that you came from, Tug of War, was with the World Games since 1981, but in the history of the World Games, it keeps happening that new sports, new disciplines arrive, and also some sports and disciplines disappear from the program, usually because they go on to become an Olympic sport. Is there some sport that you really miss in the program of today that you saw in one of the editions of the past?
Sports that have moved to the Olympics?
For example, yeah.
Well, I was very fond of rugby sevens in the World Games, and so yeah, we missed that one. And of course, I understand that they, like any other sport, appreciate very much to be in the Olympic program. But that was one of the sports that I liked, especially in the World Games.
In 2009 or 2010, I'm not quite sure, you left the position of Secretary General and were followed by Joachim Gosso, who became the first full-time CEO and still is CEO today. Why did you decide to take this step?
Well, like I said, I joined first of all Tug of War and became in '83 president of Tug of War, and in that same time I was also in the World Games executive. I have also been serving on the GAIF Council board, and in 2010 I thought I have now to keep the place to younger people and follow the games from the sideline. When I look back now, that both in the Tug of War organization as well in the World Games, from the first committees, I'm the only one still alive. I was not in particular extremely young, but I was young, and when done about 30 years in the sport, it's fine. I'm still interested in it. I'm trying to do and organize the archives and get the things all going, but I'm not saying that at my age I should be in the front line still.
That's something I wanted to say. Although you left the position, you no way left the World Games, and you in the time after 2010, you collected many historical documents and helped to build up the archive. What is your motivation to do that? Well,
I think archiving is not the first thing that sports federations are fond of or doing here. In the Netherlands, I have been working for the government, for the Civil Aviation Organization, and I know that in each organization it is essential to have a good archive, not so much for like for the sporters, it's not, but in the organization will from time to time return back to see how things has developed, and learning from the past, that's one of the things, remains essential for each organization. And you can only really learn from the past if you have the right evidence from the past.
With regard to Corona, the next edition of the World Games that was supposed to take place next year has just been postponed to 2022. The following edition is also already has a host city, which is Chengdu in China. How do you see the future of the World Games?
Well, yes, at the moment I'm trying to, like I said, I keep the archive, but I'm trying also to write a book, a chronicle book with pictures and text, trying to follow the development and evolvement of the World Games. I see that recently the World Games has updated their policies, and so I see that there is slowly, it's going very slowly, a closer cooperation with the Olympics. But I would think that the World Games has to make sure it is also an entity on itself, because it's not just an ante-room, a waiting room for those sports to get into the Olympics. Already see now that several sports have gone into the Olympics, but have not become a real member of the Olympic program. So it will be a back and forth between the Olympic Games and the World Games. So the synergy between the two will be greater, I would think, in the future. But also the World Games has to start a thinking process of what they really are, because they, as I say, they're not just only the waiting room for the Olympics. They are an event on itself as well.
I have experienced that a little, that the World Games sometimes face a little problem in just find a definition of themselves. If they do not want to say, well, we're all the sports that are not Olympic.
Yeah.
So
that has been an issue all over the years, not to refer to the non-Olympic sports. Like you said, in the very beginning, in the 80s, the group within GIVES that was starting all of this was called the non-Olympic federations. So the word non-Olympic is following it everywhere. And like I said, there is no doubt in anybody's mind that for the athletes, the summit is an Olympic game. But World Games should be also a very attractive and very respectable event standing on itself.
What do you think? What should the World Games focus on in this development? More on the sports and competitions, or maybe on the media presence? Which fields do you think are important for that?
I think they both go hand in hand. The one that is an objective of the World Games is give the sports that are not on the Olympic program also a chance to become popular and respected by the media, in particular in that time by the television. Now with the modern media, it's a little bit different, that you spread the information of an event easier online than on the normal traditional TV stations. But I have, in the years that come from very successful World Games, and then coming home and find that in your own country or in your own place, and the people coming back to their club or to their finding that in their country, very few people knew about their success in the recent World Games. While any athlete coming back from an Olympic game, every family has seen the Olympic Games. So the best thing would be that also World Games would have a far better media exposure than it has now. If you ask me how to do so, if I knew the answer, I already had proposed it years ago to the World Games. But it is indeed the one that World Games needs very much, a stronger media exposure.
Looking back on 40 years of history, is there this one memory that sticks out and jumps to your head right away of the most beautiful moment you remember in the World Games history?
No, because like I said, writing on the history is sometimes to relive the history. Sometimes that's emotional, sometimes that's happy, and sometimes it's a sad story. But I think my experience in the first World Games, when I was not yet in the executive, is maybe one as a participant, more or less, and that was still in my mind because everybody from the participants was very happy at that time, and that feeling has maybe helped me to go ahead and know where I was working for those participants, to give them that feeling.
I would say let's hope that this spirit is still alive for many athletes and organizers that join the World Games for the first time in maybe 2 years. And thanks, Ko, a lot for the interview. It was a pleasure to talk with you. And thanks to you all for watching. And we will be back next week with an interview with the fistball star Patrick Thomas from Germany. Bye-bye.